Well, let's go ahead and get started. Wanted to welcome everyone to the webinar today, Developing Apps from University Research. We have a great guest speaker with us, but just as a way of introduction, this is I think the 5th or 6th webinar that we've done in the last 6 months to promote TVC and a few of the different services that we offer here, and one of those being a software development center. So we wanted to invite all of you to come and see how we can help. So we have invited in a great guy by the name of Brian Richard. Brian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much, Spencer, for having me. My name is Brian Richard. I run a company called Furnace AI. We are a machine learning consultancy with a focus on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and developing software specifically to customer spec. Apologies for the slides. There we go. I've been writing software for about 20 years. I was formerly the editor-in-chief and CTO of Linux Magazine, and know the open source space fairly well. And I'm very, very happy to be here.
Awesome. We're glad to have you here. We have one more technical difficulty here. Taylor, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Taylor Bench, Director of the Economic Development Team here at TBC, and I'm really excited to start really focusing in on a lot of these software projects that are run by Spencer here at the SDC, and yeah, excited for the webinar. Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. So today, a few things that we're going to cover, and what we did was we reached out to people who had worked with our office before on software development. We asked them a few questions about, well, the main question we asked was, looking back at the beginning of your project, what is one thing you wish you would have known at the beginning, in hindsight now? And so from that feedback, we came up with a few of these points, and so we'll kind of go through these one by one, and this will just be a free-form, kind of conversation. If you have questions as we go through this, then feel free to send us over through WebEx. But to begin with, Taylor, I know you love this video of Simon Sinek. Can you tell us about this idea of starting with why?
Sure. Yeah, if you haven't watched any of the videos by Simon Sinek, we would highly encourage you to do that. It's just great understanding as to how to start thinking about the process of taking a new product or solving a problem for a customer segment, taking a product to market or solving a problem. And what is described in this text, as well as any of the videos that Simon Sinek does, is the importance of understanding why you are doing something. And he uses a lot of great examples in his explanations, and these concentric circles that you see on the screen now are how he describes the process that you should go through when you're thinking of a new product. And the why there encompasses what it is that your customers will get out of the purpose, the reason. Are they doing this for emotional purposes, for generating revenue? Why is it that they want to be part of your company or purchase your product? And then he moves on to how you do that, and what it is, what the product is. Like, how do you solve their problem? How is it that you are addressing their why? And then what is it that addresses their why? So is it a laptop computer that you're selling? Is it a service? But one of the best phrases I think that he mentions in all of his discussion around this topic is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that you could get in one line from this.
I like also, one of the things it says is it's biological, this idea, we're always searching for why, and people, it resonates with us. It's instinctive. So this was some of the feedback that we got as we asked researchers, what do you wish you would have known before you started developing software or an app from your research? And they said, I had this great idea, and I started to put it down on paper. I started talking to people about it. The feedback I got from people was really positive, and I think, Brian, you're going to talk about this echo later. But then, at some point, someone said, yeah, I think that already exists. And, then you go and you look on Google or wherever you look, and you see, oh, sure enough, that does exist. So I wondered if that was something happening, outside the university. So I looked on Twitter, tried to find a reference to people who felt silly inventing something that had already been invented. So I think my favorite one up here was the last one here. Just spent like 5 minutes inventing a device that lets you listen to music without earbuds before I remembered that speakers exist. That's happened to you, Taylor?
All the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was thinking about how it would be good if someone invented a practical way to read in the shower, but then I remembered audiobooks. So anyway, kind of a little silly, but this happens all the time to us.
And I would just chime in there. And someone has definitely thought of the same thing that you have thought. Ideas are pretty cheap. It's whether or not they've executed it or not.
Sure.
And there's always room in the market for competition.
I like that.
Or a different take on it. So I would say definitely do your homework, but don't get too discouraged that the itch that you're trying to scratch already exists.
I like that a lot. You think of every one of these is listed up here: dishwashers, audiobooks, corn dogs, and speakers. I mean, how many huge companies or divisions, huge divisions of companies are built around this, and they're all competing. So I totally agree. So this idea of, can you distill your invention or your research into something that's digestible for anyone, and can you explain it quickly? I put in here originally, I think I put 5 minutes, then down to 2 minutes, and then Brian, you commented that it should maybe even be simpler than 2 minutes.
I like 5 words. So if you can explain it in 5 words, I think you've probably thought through it extremely well, and you can deliver that extremely.
Can you really take something complicated and take it down to 5 words?
If it's too complicated to explain in 5 words, it's probably too complicated for your customers.
Can you I appreciate that. Can you think of any examples of the companies that you've worked with so that we could get a sense of what a 5-word description looks like? And I'm going to talk a little bit so that you can think for a second, but
Sure.
If you could throw some out, even if it's your own company,
yeah,
that would be very interesting, I think, to get some examples of population.
So let's while I'm thinking, as I'm talking, I'll do my own company. So I used to run a cell phone charging station company. We built cell phone charging stations for public spaces, predominantly sports teams.
That's 6 words.
Okay.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
We'll,
I have to count.
So for Furnace, you're looking at software consultancy focused on machine learning, ML.
ML, I like that. Yeah.
ML. All right. So you've got to do what you have to get
Sure.
it down to 5. For one of our clients, for example, they take baby photos. That's all they do, and they photograph 10% of all babies born in the U.S. So baby photos in hospital. Very, very simple. And then from there, they can do all kinds of things. Yeah. But that's what started. And when you're starting something, you really, really need to think small.
Okay.
Do you have a limit of number of characters in those words? No. Because we work with a lot
I will allow compound words.
Okay.
Hyphenated words, that's totally fine. But when we, the 2-minute pitch is good, but nobody hits 2 minutes. Nobody can pull it down to 2 minutes. And everybody kind of gets angry when I say, explain it in 5 words, and they say, oh, it's too complicated. Way too complicated for 5 words. It's like, well, how are you going to get it built, and get revenue in the door if it's that complicated?
very good. So again, just kind of summarize: simple, short, and visuals help. I think this idea of back of a napkin. We sent out an email this morning with a worksheet to guide anyone that registered for the webinar. Hopefully, you received an email that was developing apps for university research worksheet. What is the problem? Who are your customers? What is your solution? What's your contribution to the solution? And in that last box, I think it would be, or the last box would be interesting to see if you can take your idea and, as Brian said, put it into 5 words. So that's the challenge. So short case study, and this came up in one of the responses to the survey I sent out in preparation for this webinar. Was how do I know if I'm on the right track, or how do I know? First of all, who's my customer? That was a common thing, and then how do I reach them? How do I find them? Mint is an interesting case study. So originally, we know Mint now is this money management tool. It'll sync up with your bank accounts, pulls in information, slices and dices it, sends alerts. I mean, there's tons of things. But it started out, 10 years ago as a blog. And it was a personal finance blog. It was a guy who was he would share tips when he found something cool. If he found a bank that had an exceptional rate, he posted about it. And he built, you can see a typical blog there on the left or the right-hand side of that blog site is, categories and top-rated posts. So then what's cool is top-rated posts, then it's like, okay, if that was a top-rated post, I'm going to find more information like that. So, he listens to his blog followers, and you'll see there, it's kind of hidden on the blog, but it says, stay updated. Give me your email address. Great way to get feedback from customers, to ask for their email address. So once, years later, he's got this great blog, a lot of followers, creates the mint.com website, and that's all it is. That little shot there is he's just collecting email addresses. And it's kind of a stay tuned, we're working on it. From that, again, later in 2010, you see an actual shot of the first website. And then from that, 7 years later, you have what it looks like, as a mobile app. In fact, there's even an app for the iWatch. So you can see the progression there from blog, inexpensive, maybe even free customer feedback to several iterations where you get to the point where if you notice there, it's actually an Intuit app, Intuit bought Mint for like $1 billion.
More than $1.
More than $1. More than.
Was it more than $1?
It might have been.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get more than $1 out of your exit, you're good. And I think it's a pretty common way for new, in quote, air quotes, startups to get information is provide something free, collect as much information as you can freely, and then build based on what you see happening on the website. Can you add to that, Brian?
No, I think I remember I used to read the Mint financial blog. I remember when Mint launched their software, and it was one of those things that there was such an obvious hole in the market for managing personal finances that it was stunning to see it pull down that information and then populate those graphs. I was like, oh, look at this. This is amazing. So, but, like you said, they started blogging. They learned who their customers are. They learned where their pain points were and what they needed to actually end up building. And they built it, and it was just a phenomenal product. Still,
it's amazing to me what we're willing to share as consumers. And we don't necessarily realize that we're helping to build a business. But I mean, anytime you share your email address with someone, they are hoping to get something from you. Yeah. And hopefully in the future, they're going to provide something of value back to you. So, just as an interesting aside, you can go to this, I can't remember what it's called, like Google, it's Wayback Machine or Time Machine, and you go back and you can look at what websites looked like, years ago. Very, very interesting to see how far some websites have come.
That was a good looking 2007 blog.
Yeah, right?
I
And
would,
this right
I
here?
would think it would be a little younger than that, or older than that, but it's 2007. We forget, 2007 was when the iPhone came out. So
It's amazing that even in 3 or 4 years, you can go from a blog to acquisition.
yeah, and it's interesting to bring up email. Everybody hates email. Apparently, I don't. I love email, but email still converts. It is one of your most important touch points with your customers. You'll be interacting with them, especially if you're selling into B2B or enterprises. But focus on building an email list as quickly in the process as possible.
Awesome. So, Brian, tell us about MVP.
Excellent. So MVP. MVP stands for most viable product, and really what it's a way of thinking about how to validate your assumptions as quickly as possible. So when we help clients build MVPs, what we're trying to do is build the least amount of software that we can, so we can get into customers' hands, start testing out your ideas, testing the market fit, and then starting to get feedback. At the end of the day, startups are extremely difficult. Failure rates on startups are around 90%. The only way you can stack the deck more against yourself is if you were starting a restaurant. I think the failure rate is 95% on a restaurant. So this is a way for you to fail faster. So the odds are you're going to fail. You want to fail fast, because the minute you decide you commit to this, you just start burning cash, which is fine if you're willing to commit to that. But the job is to get to a business and to get to revenue. And in order to do that, as Mark Andreessen says, you have to have a product. So there's 3 major components, in my view, to a startup. There's the idea, there's the team, and then there is the execution. What we like to say is ideas are cheap. Everybody has ideas. There's ideas everywhere. They're a good starting point. Team, we're not really talking about team today, but team, I think, is actually one of the more important things. And it's actually one of the hardest things. Building a team, maintaining a team, keeping a team together, and moving in the right direction, extremely difficult, but it's also extremely important. And then execution, what we say is execution is difficult, but mostly it's expensive. It's expensive in time, and it's expensive in money. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. When you go from idea to execution, that's where most people never bridge the gap, and that's why most startups end up failing.
So, Brian, question there really quick on MVP. If I have an idea, and say for the sake of our conversation here, I have an app idea or software idea, how do I know what elements are or should be part of the MVP of my idea? Because my idea is to change personal finance or whatever it is, but how do I know what the elements of an MVP are versus my whole product at the end of the day?
Part of that is going to be talking to potential customers. So in a perfect world, if you're starting a startup and your idea hopefully is you're scratching your own itch, which means you have a problem with something and you want to fix it. So hopefully you're coming at it from the point of a user, for instance. So I would never start a company around social media because I don't really use social media. That would be a terrible idea. I should start a company around cell phone charging because I have problems keeping my phone turned on. So hopefully you're starting from that point. If you're not, you've already got some red flags because you have an idea that may or may not fit at all with what the market is. So hopefully you're scratching, and you're not just trying to capitalize on an opportunity. So hopefully you're starting from that assumption that you're scratching your own itch. You're talking to colleagues and individuals in the space or in the industry that you're building into. And then the final thing is money is kind of going to dictate what you can and can't do. So let me go to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about getting to where you're at. So kind of as we talked about before, this Jack Kornfield quote will really apply to anything in your life for the most part, but especially to startups. The very simple calculation called burn rate, which is basically just your money over time, and it tells you once you write that first check, the clock starts ticking until the money starts coming in. So let's talk a little bit about getting to how you like structure your MVP. So when you start telling people that you have an idea or that you want to start a startup, you're going to hear an immense amount of positive feedback. Especially in this country, we want people to start businesses. We are very, very capitalist-centric. We're very, very pro-entrepreneur, especially over the last 10 years in the tech space. When you talk to your friends, your family, your colleagues, almost no one is going to tell you your baby's ugly. And it may be a terrible idea. But people aren't going to tell you that to your face. What you have to do is get early, honest feedback from the people who are actually going to write you checks. And that means putting together an MVP. MVPs are, to a degree, constrained by budget, unless you have a friend. A nice early validation is if you have friends or family who want to work on your idea, who say, hey, let me work on this for free. So that's a good indication. And if you have that, and if they're software developers, that's a step up because you can get that work at a reduced rate. But even when you talk to potential customers about an idea, they're not going to tell you your baby's up, potentially. They may tell you what they want, but they won't tell you your idea is bad. So you have to get an MVP built, get it in your customer's hands, and then you will start to get honest feedback. Because that's really where the rubber meets the road. You will find out in your analytics are they actually using it. If they're not actually using it, you can ask them why. Maybe they think it's not novel, but it's not critical. So then you can start to align yourself to make it a critical piece of their workflow or their industry. And then when the trial period is over, do they sign up? You know, is your application or your service, your device so critical to their industry, they're so helpful that they basically just say, yeah, we'll pay the whatever a month to do it, the licensing fee. The best way to get there is to do one thing well. So you asked about, what do you put into an MVP and what do you leave out of? Start with just one thing. We see a lot of apps come across our desk, and they've got literally everything but the kitchen sink. And it's, you can't use it. There's so much stuff. But if you focus on doing one thing, that's going to get you down to 5 words description or a 2-word elevator pitch. And if you look at some of the really high valued companies in the world, let's say Cisco, what do? They are the plumbing of the internet, they like to say. X.AI, which is not a big company yet, but probably will be. All they do, their tagline, we schedule meetings. If you see a presentation from their CEO, he pounds that in. We do one thing, we schedule meetings. And from there, once you have a customer base, once you have revenue, you can start to add on, but you've got to get something in customer hands, and you got to get revenue. Apple likes to say behind every yes or behind every feature there's 1,000 no's. For a startup, it's probably 10,000 no's because you're kind of in your head and you're grinding through ideas. So learning how to say no is a skill that you probably need to develop. Most of us can't say no for the most part, but very, very successful people tend to say no more than they say yes. So that's kind of the journey to MVP, or some of the thinking that you need to do to get to.
So I'm curious, for some people that are joining mid-webinar, you said in this country, have you had experience with other countries where they don't have a reservation telling you baby's ugly?
India.
Okay.
India for sure. So I've done a lot of work in India. I've been there, boots on the ground, trying to set up an office one time. It's interesting because to your face, you won't. Everything is very positive. Everything is a yes in India to a degree. So if you're in a meeting, everything is good. But as soon as you're out of the meeting, it very, very quickly you'll know this is a non-starter. It's very interesting. It's still some of the same things that we see here. When we were working in India, we would say, is that a hard yes or a soft yes?
Okay.
Because everything was, yeah, sure, we can totally do that. But there's a lot of like physical clues that you can look at and say, well, that's not necessarily a hard yes. But no, there seems to be less of a stigma around kind of entrepreneurial honesty.
Okay. We could probably do a whole webinar about hard yes and soft yes.
Hard yes and soft yes. So you always want to fast. What we used to say when we were raising money back in the day, you want a fast no or a quick no. You don't want an investor to say, oh, that's a pretty good idea, let me think about it, or yeah, thanks, we'll let you know. Because then you're like, okay, the phone's going to ring every day, the check's coming in. You want a hard, fast no. And the best investors will just tell you, no, it's a non-starter. Not going to. Great. It's depressing, but it saves you time and energy. So predominantly we are a machine learning consultancy. We build software solutions for our clients.
What is machine learning?
Based on machine learning. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
So machine learning is kind of the modern science that applies higher level math to large amounts of data in order to predict future outcomes when new data comes in. So the way machine learning works is we have these frameworks and neural networks that we train on massive, well, in some cases massive, in some cases less massive, blocks of data. From that, machine or the neural network is able to learn to make predictions based on new data coming in. I guess I just repeated myself. So let's talk about some use cases, for example. Machine vision is very big right now. And a lot of the frameworks like TensorFlow or Caffe are very, very good at things like identifying objects in photographs. So you feed it a properly trained TensorFlow network a photo, and in some cases you don't have to train these anymore, and say, grab all the photos that have cats in them, and it'll just do that. So it doesn't sound like prediction necessarily, but it is. It's basically predicting which photos have cats in them based on certain numerical equivalents. And that, so grading photos, for example, is another thing that we've actually been doing. Whether or not a photo is in focus, whether the exposure is correct or not, whether the white balance is correct. Some other things that we're doing is accelerometer data. It seems that accelerometers seem to be everywhere. They're in your phone, they're on your wrist, they're in your shoes. Those generate massive amounts of data that people want to know what the steps are, how fast they're running, whether or not they're on a bicycle. That's all just pattern recognition. So it's pattern recognition for prediction, and we're seeing it really kind of being applied to apps, devices, services, just an intelligent service layer that's kind of going over the top of so many products.
This is really cool. I think when you say pattern recognition, you say, photo, identification. I hope that for the attendees of the webinar, that it's getting them thinking about their research and about their everyday, the jobs they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And are there ways to, automate some of that?
Sure. So really, there's two main areas in machine learning, and they're both based on predictive analysis. But it's predictive analysis based on historical data for new data trends, for example. So improving marketing campaigns. The other thing is automating repetitive tasks. Image grading, for example. One of our clients is grading images by hand. They want to completely offload that to a neural network, and it's totally possible. We have 30 million images that we get to work with. So we've got huge data sets, and we're able to train the system actually pretty easily for something like that. So there's hard problems, and there's relatively easy problems for a machine learning solution. you don't really know, actually, until you get into it, just how hard or how easy it is, generally speaking. So we talk about that on the next slide. Very cool. So if you're thinking about machine learning solutions or wanting to make your device, your product, or your service intelligent, the thing you need to think about is data. So there's two aspects of machine learning. There's training, so you train the system, and then there's inference. Inference is the actual model, the machine learning model in action, acting on data. For training is actually the hard part, and you need a ton of data to train. One of the limitations of machine learning right now, where we're at in the technology, it's a relatively new technology based with the tools we have, is we can't look at a problem and say, you need this much data. There's just no tools to let you know how much data you actually need. So we typically tell people to start with 10,000 records. For harder problems, we've seen problems that are 10 million records. But usually if you start with 10,000, it's a good start. It'll let you know how much more you need. Sometimes you don't even need 10,000, but on occasion, you need a ton more. So the thing about the data is, what are your sources? Do you have easy access to the data? Are you able to generate it yourself, or do you need to go purchase it? Is it freely available on the web? So things like image libraries, I know there's a couple of research and institutes and companies that are building massive image libraries. So if you need 3 million images of cats, you don't have to go grab those. Those are freely available at this point. The other thing to think about, and this is the hard part really, is categorization. Just having the data isn't enough. You have to set, for machine learning, you're setting up parameters that you're judging things on. So whether or not a photo is in focus, for example. You have to go through and categorize each piece of data as either being in focus or out of focus. Just like, if you were learning, if a person was learning, you have to show them this is good, this is bad. Or it's a star rating from 1 to 5. If it's what we call a non-hard ground or subjective parameter, that's where the majority of time and effort has to go in. So if you have 10,000 records and you have 5 parameters that you're measuring those records on, that's a lot of time spent. That's weeks spent grading data.
So when you talk about grading data, does for our audience, do they have to know about programming, or can it be set up and then they are going in and grading it?
Yeah, no. So what we do is we talk to you about what we're grading about, or what we're grading the data on. So what are your parameters? Let's say there's 5 parameters, and we'll build you a tool basically to grade the tool. And we have a generic set of tools that we just sort of cobble together based on whatever data is needed, whether it's audio files, video files, or just plain text. So things for like accelerometer data, one of the things that we have to do a lot of the times is pull noise out. So we have to generate a ton of data that's basically like jumping or shaking, because they don't want to measure that necessarily. If, like, say, you're measuring respiration, so you want to pull jumping out and then get down to respiration. So in cases like that, where it's, you can kind of generate that data to a degree, but for things like non-subjective stuff like white balance or is this pose good, so a human has to go in and actually like grade that pose. And that's where it's a lot of upfront time. And if you're thinking about adding intelligence to your products and service, this is just what I would recommend or give you a heads up on. There's going to be a lot of time spent grading your data.
So fortunately for a lot of our audience, they have access to inexpensive people that can do that.
Inexpensive people.
So students, I mean,
students.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So I mean, for our audience, if you're a researcher, you have access to students that could be doing this grading,
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. So once you train the students on what your rubric is, then they can apply that. So yeah, no, there's a lot of eyeballs and a lot of hands at a university.
What about those that don't have a huge amount of data? If it's not 10,000 records, but it's, hey, I do this surgery 50 times a year, or there aren't that many. How do you think about data in that sense? It's a small data set that you're working with.
It's tough. So in instances like that, if you're an early stage and you're an idea, or you're talking about something that doesn't happen very often, the first thing we would say is, does this thing actually need to be automated if it only has 50? What's the value of automating that potentially? The other thing is we can look for ways to actually generate data based on existing data. So taking an existing data set, modifying the individual records, if like raw data that's in a database. Sometimes we can fake data a little bit in that way, but it's not the best method. If you don't have the data, there's not a source for the data, most likely there's probably not a use case for machine learning.
Cool. Fair enough. Okay, cool. So before we get to Q&A, and we've got questions that were submitted beforehand that we'll let Brian flex his brain on. He hasn't seen the questions yet. But as an incentive with registering, we did invite anyone who registered, give them the opportunity. We're going to do a drawing following this, and we'll actually extend it to anyone that registered, not just attended. But one-on-one consultations with Furnace AI, and also with another help shop that we've been working with called Prototypal Solutions. And so following this webinar, we'll send out a survey, just ask you some questions, and also to see if you'd like to visit with Brian, and he's been nice enough to offer that. We also, through Prototypal Solutions, will be giving away 10 wireframes. And a wireframe is should be complex, but these wireframes will be pretty simple, but helpful in taking your idea out of your brain and putting it onto paper, so that you can see what the essential elements of it would be, both for the user and also on the back end. So we're grateful to Furnace and also to Prototypal for being available and providing some services to our faculty and staff. So let's go to some Q&A. So let's see. If you go ahead.
Questions for me?
Well, there are questions that came in for the group, and also if you're listening, you want to type up a question and send it through the chat. We're monitoring that, so go ahead and send it over. So one question that came in: how do I know if the market has room for my app, or if it's overcrowded? And touch on a little bit, but expand on that.
It's a tough question. One thing to look at is the overall size of the market. So one of the areas that we were kind of looking at with a group was big market recently, and we looked at the overall market space. And the overall market space is only like 850 million globally per year, and there are so many baby monitors out there. So looking at how big is the market, and then looking at who the players are. So when we were doing Linux Magazine, we used to call it the Google problem, which was, so we were running a print magazine for the end of print magazines a little bit, and we were also online, and we were trying to do all kinds of things, new things online. And the question that we had was called like the Google problem, which was, can Google put us out of business overnight by like turning on a switch? Mm-hmm. That's something else to kind of also look at. Who are the major players? Sometimes when there's like a major player out there, it's an opportunity. They're not going to be doing everything right because it's a big boat to turn. So especially if they're sort of like traditional players like Philips or General Electric, who are, they're going to take some time to like get a product out to market. So it's an opportunity to like get to market fast with something new and novel. But for companies like, if you're going up head-to-head with Google or Facebook, for instance, you maybe want to position it as a complement to those companies so that they may want to acquire it, rather than, hey, I'm going to rebuild Facebook we've seen people do 10 times and fail. So it's really tough to say, but I would say size of the market. You want a big market. We were talking to somebody about an idea, and the market was $64 billion a year.
Is that big?
That's $1. More than Mint sold for, I think. So, and if there's $64 billion being spent on something, there's probably some inefficiencies, there's probably some friction that can be taken out, and there's probably some novel ways of thinking, because there's probably massive companies that have been doing the same thing over and over again for 25 years, and just, they've been grandfathered in. So the bigger the market, the better. At the end of the day, it's really talking to your customers and seeing, where their pain points are, understanding their pain points. If you can identify the pain points, get something to market fast, and you should be fine.
Great. Another question was, considering our audience today, they have full-time jobs, they have a lot of responsibilities. What is the first step, or what are the first maybe 2 steps that could be taken to transition their research to software, or to a website, or to anything that kind of bridges the gap from academic to consumer facing?
So assuming, it kind of gets back to one of the things that I said earlier. So there's a kind of a cliche phrase that if you have a dream team, I didn't used to think that way. I was a classic software developer, lone wolf guy, where I was going to build it all, I was going to do it all, I was going to own it all. I have since matured into, if I have any idea whatsoever, I tell everybody, and I try to recruit as many people as I can. I don't want to own everything anymore. And I think if you're in a job, you probably have a family, you have a mortgage, you have all kinds of things that you have to worry about. The way to sort of maximize your ability to bring something to market is to start building a team. Build a team. As I said before, I think the team is the most important thing. Companies get bought all the time just for the team. You see Google, Facebook, Amazon buying companies all the time, shutting down the product the same day because they just need the engineers. That's how important the team is. So that's, I think, you can't do it all. You can try, but you're not going to do it, most likely. Most people can't do it. And especially if you have to have a daytime job, you can't focus full-time on this, start trying to build a team.
That's great. Who are the team members? What are the functional roles, just to be aware of in the beginning?
So usually, 9 times out of 10, you see a technical co-founder and then a business founder who usually either brings the idea or brings the market experience to either sales or positioning. So that's usually your two major roles. A lot of times, if you go to like a startup or something like that, you see a lot of people looking for technical co-founders. I know when I was kind of in the startup space, you would get 3 offers a day to be a technical co-founder. If you are a software engineer, you are in this country, you are anywhere, really, you are in demand. So it's you'll be overwhelmed a little bit if you're on the technology side with offers. If you're on the technology side, you probably have a ton of ideas for things that you could bring to market, that you could build yourself. What you may lack is like the business acumen to determine whether or not those are a market fit, if the timing is right, and if you should be spending your time on it. Because maybe you have that problem, but maybe it's so like close to the metal on your laptop that only like 10 people in the world have it. Whereas you want to look for a $60 billion industry, and maybe your head's not really in that space. So
that's great. Earlier when you came in and we were chatting, you said that you previously were unfamiliar with this idea that you could come to a university and tap into the technology there and license it. Can you talk about that? And because you're on the outside right now, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. So one of the great things that you can do to ensure to de-risk your early ideas and your early startup ideas is to see, if you can patent or patent some portion or all of your solution, whether it's technology or otherwise. The interesting thing about departments like the TVC is they've already done the research, and so it's acquired the patents. So you don't have to pay for patent attorneys and things like that and go through that process, which can be lengthy. I've written software patents. It's one of the worst things I've ever had to do in my entire life, especially if you're coming at it from an engineering perspective, because it's so fuzzy and non-engineering in some cases. But you can go to the TVC and they have the patents already that you could potentially be building software on, and all you need to do is license them. And I'm sure the licensing is to a degree flexible. You guys are in the business of working with early stage startups.
Yeah.
And it's one of those unknown unknowns. I didn't know about this until someone I knew did it. They licensed, I think, 6 or 8 patents from the University of Missouri, I believe. Built the company. It's called iVerify. I think they expanded it to 14 patents, and they, I think, last summer sold to Alibaba for 50 patents. So it's a way to fast track your intellectual property. It probably also, if it's research based and you're thinking about machine learning, there's probably also a ton of data already behind it.
Interesting. Okay.
So it may also fast track your machine learning stuff if you're thinking about adding intelligence.
Yeah, you mentioned TVC in our role, and Taylor, you could talk about this also, but kind of in closing, it's awesome to work here because we get to see all across campus. We get to see these pockets of innovation and potential for collaboration. And then for us, it's a matter of identifying the markets, who the customers might be, what the value propositions are, and then matchmaking.
Yeah, one note on that. I think some of the most successful endeavors that we've seen here at TVC are interdisciplinary. So, I mean, it can be anything from technology developed in a lab or in an office in the geography department, matching up with the Ski Institute, the Scientific Computing and Imaging Institute, or the School of Music and the Computer Science Department, or biology and the medical school. I mean, those are the type of combinations where if you're in one of those labs or you're working in those spaces and you have some ideas, there are complements out there that could potentially help either grow the market or grow the opportunity and just solve the problem maybe with a little bit more elegance or a little bit more allure for the customers. So that's something to think about as we're developing the software here and thinking about apps and development is, are there other disciplines that could be looped in to help?
So that's awesome, Taylor. We have, again, great resources here at TVC. We're really thankful that we could have Brian in today, and especially for the Q&A. I think the Q&A, I always get as much out of the Q&A as I do of the presentation. So we want to let everyone know that we're here for you. If you want to bounce ideas off, if you want to make it more formal and submit an invention disclosure, we have processes, but we can run that through. A comment that came in from the chat from Rich. Rich is a great resource. He is in the Department of Health Promotion and Education, and he actually teaches courses on app development based around kind of behavior change methods. And his comment was, if it's an idea for an app, there's so many free tools for you to, and many of them are pretty simple to learn. Mm-hmm. Go out and test it. Get it into people's hands and see what kind of feedback you can get. There's this idea that, I can't share what I have. It's top secret. Mm-hmm. Brian, you said, talk to everyone about it.
Yeah, that may or may not be the best advice. But that is, I have friends and I have colleagues who they don't tell anybody anything what they're working on. And my view is that ideas are extremely cheap. I have never seen an idea sold in all the clients that we've worked with, hundreds and hundreds of clients. And the reason is everybody has their own idea, and they think their idea is a lot better than yours, most likely. So it's...
I'm not going to leave their idea to take yours.
Probably not. Because even if they take the idea, they still got to build it. Sure. And most people, if they haven't built their own idea, why are they going to steal yours? So I'm sure it happens, but I think you're more like the industrial espionage stage, where you're trying to get something to market if you're Samsung before Apple gets it out. But even then, people still buy phones. So I am a big believer in getting it out of your head, getting feedback as much as possible. We don't try and run super secret startups at all.
I understand valuable feedback.
One comment, Spencer, on your discussion there, and the comment from Rich. I think those tools that you were talking about, I find that I have my educational background in my area of interest and expertise a little bit, and if I step outside of that, it's tough. I don't know which tools to use. Like if I went to the biology department or the geography department or whatever it may be, I don't know what those tools would be. And so I'll just plug Spencer here at the SDC and probably Rich as well. Spencer, you could be an asset for anyone looking for those type of tools. It's easy to Google things, but it's also nice to get some feedback from somebody who's used those tools or is in the space. So I'd reach out to Spencer here at the SDC. He has the ability to tap into people like Brian to pull expertise from a very deep experience. And so if that's easier, I would just say reach out to Spencer pretty quickly, and he can help on the software side.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's one of those that's just one of those situations. If you don't know, like if you're not in the technology space, you don't know what to type into Google.
Right.
Like, easy way to build an app or something like that. And I think what Rich is talking about is things like interactive wireframe tools, which will basically, using drag and drop, WYSIWYG tools, you can wireframe up an app, add actions to it, and it'll perform like you walk through.
Yeah, blocks of code. So one that Rich always that he touts is App Inventor.
Yeah. So, and it's just case. It's one of those things that you just, if you talk to somebody like Spencer about your idea and what next steps would be, he could point you in that direction very, very quickly.
Thanks everyone for joining. Big thanks to Brian with Furnace AI, and we're also grateful for Prototypal Solutions sponsoring this webinar. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.